The orders are in. One man has decided that for whatever reason, he has no option but to turn to his nuclear arsenal in order to achieve his goals. You have already been notified of an inbound attack. Much of your country will be destroyed, and now it's up to you to make sure the destruction will be mutual. Do you turn the key and flip the switch, knowing this could be the end for most life on this planet? I think most people would say that mutually assured destruction would be somewhat of a waste, a missed opportunity for humanity, for we should have been destined for so much more than just to vanish in a blink of an eye because of some bickering and one man's ambition. We as a society are always about 20 minutes away from complete and total annihilation. Things have certainly been much better in the last 30 to 40 years, but still there are and have been more than enough missiles sitting in silos ready to go for decades now. These things and the people who have the responsibility to launch them are ready, willing and able. Which is why when Russia said it's putting its nuclear forces on high alert and the USA shrugged its shoulders, that's because they're basically always on high alert anyways. The missiles are always fueled and ready to go. Few, if any, wars have begun with as much nuclear posturing as Russia's invasion of Ukraine. 1 week before beginning its offensive, Moscow conducted exercises of its nuclear launch systems. A few days later, Putin accused Ukraine of building nuclear weapons. And he warned them that any outside country standing in Russia's way would face consequences such as they have never seen in their history. A not-so-subtle nuclear threat. Immediately as the fighting began, Russia's military attacked and seized Ukrainian nuclear facilities, while falsely claiming that Kiev wants to build dirty bombs. And as Russian forces met unexpected resistance, Putin announced that Russia's deterrence forces, which include its nuclear weapons, were being activated. Analysts and observers have been frightened by Putin's actions, and for good reason. Whenever the leader of a nuclear-armed state signals a readiness to use nuclear weapons, it is worth taking seriously. That is especially true when the threats come from a man who controls the world's largest nuclear stockpile and who is simultaneously conducting an unprovoked large-scale military invasion. Putin has shown his power and revealed himself to be belligerent and unconcerned about innocent casualties. And here you are. The orders are clear. You must turn the key and press down the button, and the rest will take care of itself. The targets have been set many decades in advance. How can so much pressure be put on the back of one person? This might make you the most significant individual in human history. You could be the last unfinished chapter. You wonder, is this the first and the last time someone has had to make this decision? September 26, 1983 was a close call. The Soviet Union's missile attack early warning system displayed, in large red letters, the word launch. A computer screen stated to the officer on duty, Stanislav Petrov, that it could say, with high reliability, that an American ballistic missile had been launched and was headed towards the Soviet Union. First, it was just one missile, then another, until the system reported a total of 5. It was up to Stanislav Petrov to report what was happening, and he was well aware that if he did, then the Soviet nuclear doctrine called for a full nuclear retaliation. And given that the missiles were airborne, there would be no time for double-checking, much less negotiating with the US. Petrov did not report the incoming strike. He and others on his staff concluded that what they were seeing was a false alarm. And it was. The system mistook the sun's reflection from clouds for a missile, 5 of them. Petrov prevented a nuclear war. He has said that the influence on his decision included that he had been told a US strike would be all out. So 5 missiles seemed illogical. Also, the launch detection system was new, and in his view, not yet trustworthy, and that the ground radar failed to pick up corroborative evidence. The Soviet Union did not reward Petrov for possibly saving the world. As he understands this, it was because the incident and other bugs found in the missile detection system embarrassed his superiors and the scientists who were responsible for it, so that if he had been officially rewarded, they would have had to be punished. A nuclear security expert said that at the time in 1983, the US-Soviet relationship had deteriorated to the point where the Soviet Union as a system was geared to expect an attack and to retaliate very quickly to it. It was nervous and prone to mistakes and accidents. The false alarm that happened on Petrov's watch could not have come at a more dangerous, intense phase in the US-Soviet relations. But there was an incident that came even before this one. On 27th of October 1962, Vasyli Alexandrovich Arhipov was on board the Soviet submarine B-59 near Cuba when the US forces began dropping non-lethal depth charges. While the action was designed to encourage Soviet submarines to surface for identification, the crew of B-59 were unaware of the intention and too deep underwater to receive any communication. They thought they were under attack. And what's more, the B-59 was holding onto a 10-kiloton nuclear torpedo, which the officers had permission to lodge without waiting for approval from Moscow. The captain of the submarine, Valentin Grigorievich Savitsky, decided a war might already have started and wanted to launch. What saved the world this time was the fact that 3 officers on board had to agree to authorize a nuclear launch: the captain, the political officer, and the chief of staff. This wasn't typical. Usually Soviet submarines armed with a special weapon only required the captain to get authorization from the political officer. But due to Vasyli Arhipov's position as chief of staff, the B-59's captain was required to gain his approval also. An argument broke out, with only the chief of staff preventing the launch. Arhipov eventually persuaded Captain Savitsky to surface and await orders from Moscow. According to Wikipedia, there have been about 15 nuclear close calls since the 1950s. Not all of them were likely to start the nuclear holocaust between the US and USSR, but it would seem that humanity has had quite a few lucky rolls of the nuclear dice. Still, history hasn't quite put anyone in the same position you are now. Both Arhipov and Petrov were put in situations where there was a lot of ambiguity. There is no ambiguity now. You must turn the key and press down the red button. And if you can't bring yourself to do it, then someone else will. What is worse, your refusal may result in being accused of treason and be dealt with accordingly. Disobeying direct orders is not how you got to where you are now. Maybe it will be okay. After all, it's not you who has made this decision. You're just flipping a switch. You're effectively innocent, just doing your job. You take a deep breath, then you fire. The terrifying point of this video is probably that if someone in charge of nuclear weapons chooses to use them, it is unlikely that something or anyone will stop them. The chain of command linking those who are responsible for activating the weapons and those who decide when to use them is deliberately short, since in a nuclear war, swift response is of the essence. Luckily, we are not there yet. It is not the Cold War over again. If Russia were to detonate nuclear weapons as part of the current invasion, it would run counter to the state's official doctrine and Putin's stated nuclear plans. Within the foundations of state policy of the Russian Federation in the field of nuclear deterrence, the government has stated it will not use nuclear weapons unless the very existence of the Russian state is threatened, or if Russia's nuclear deterrent capacity, aka its nuclear forces and its command, are at risk. And Putin has emphasized that Russia would use nuclear weapons only if under missile attack, meaning even dramatic losses in Ukraine would fall far short of these thresholds. Right now, Putin faces no serious threats to his power, and while the war is not going to plan, it is far from lost. The truth is that the Russian military continues its slow advance, and it retains tremendous conventional combat power which it can use to escalate this conflict significantly. Therefore, as the situation currently stands, the use of nuclear weapons could serve no military purpose besides shock and horror, which already are being inflicted in other ways. Meaning that current nuclear posturing is almost certainly meant to deter Western involvement in the fight, especially the defense of Ukraine's airspace by enforcing a no-fly zone. Not to mention that their use would be so catastrophic it would leave the West with no options but to escalate itself. If Russia were facing defeat, a nuclear strike could force Ukraine to concede. But it is unlikely that this would ultimately protect Russia or help Putin and his allies stay in power. This may not help you sleep at night, but it's been like a long time since we could murder mostly everything on the planet, and we haven't done so yet, and that's nice. Tomorrow's a new day. Hopefully the sun rises in the east and not the west at the same time. Now find out why Putin justifies his reasoning behind invading Ukraine and why that is a load of rubbish. Click here. This is my Patreon map. I would like to say thanks to my long-term lifesavers. I'll be happy to add any new patrons or supporters to this map. Now leave a comment guessing the location this footage was taken, and I'll see you soon. Geoperspective out.